Hey, how's it going, everyone? Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to part 4 in a series where I show you how to build a simple modern habit tracker called consistency. So here's where we left off in the last video. We set up the route for /habits so we can load the my habits component. And as you can see here, we separated it into two separate parts of the UI, the navigation component on the left and the main section on the right side. So in the last video, we weren't able to finish this goals component over here. So that's what we're going to pick up in this video. And the second thing I want to show you in this video is how to set up a basic Express server with one endpoint. All right. So those are the two things that we want to do in this video. Set up the goals component and create the backend server with Express and create one simple endpoint for that. So let's get started. So the last component we developed was this My Habits desktop component over here. And as you can see here on the UI, we want our goals component to be loaded directly under the consistency title. So in our nav container, underneath the title, we're going to create a new component called goals. And we're going to be building this component out first. So I've already created a folder here under components called goals. Within this folder, let's create a new file called index.js. And this is the exact same setup we've been doing for the previous components we built. So as usual, we're just going to export default from ./goals. And now let's create this goals file over here. So let's go ahead and create a new file called goals.jsx. And instead of retyping everything, I'm just going to copy everything that's within the My Habits component and put it inside the goals. Now I can simply just remove these styled components, remove this import, and let's start from a fresh return. Before I start reading all the styled components, let's just change this My Habits to goals. So as you guys know, I like to work from a top-down perspective. So what I'm going to do first is create my goals container. All right, this container is going to contain all of the other styled components for our goals section. So what we want to start off with is a goals header, and we're going to create the rest of the goal stuff afterwards. So let's just start off with the header. So what do we have in the header here? Let's take a look. In the goals header, we just have the goals title, and we have a button that says add goal. So let's create two divs inside of this header. So we'll call the first one, I'm just going to say title section, and it's going to say goals. And the next section that we want is going to be a add goal button. So now let's go ahead and create the styled components for everything that we've written over here. So instead of implementing all of the CSS directly within these styled components and then saving it and showing you guys what it looks like, let's just go directly into the browser and do some basic styling from in here so you guys can see exactly what's happening with each line of CSS that I put. So first, let's just save all of our files that we've just written. We have our goals component here. Let's just import that. Import goals from components/goals. All right, let's save this. You know what, for now, instead of making this a button, I'll make this one a div as well, and we can style it in the future once we start adding in the actual functionality for adding a goal. For now, we're just going to set up the front end with some dummy data. So we can just keep this as a div for now. Add a goal. So what do we have here? Here's our goals container. Here's our header container. And here's the two stuff that we have inside of the header. All right, first, I want to set for our goals container, I want to set the display to flex. Then I'll set flex direction to column. The reason for this is because, as you can see here in the demo, all of our items within the goals container are flowing downwards, which means the way that I'm styling it is one big column. And then here for the headers container, we want to make sure that items are going from left to right. So we're going to set this to display flex. And now, as you can see, the items are going from left to right. And then we'll set the justify content property to space between. So now they have an equal amount of space in between both divs, but we do want some margin on the right side, right? So in our goals container, we'll also add some margin right, and we'll do 45 pixels. This is also according to the design that I implemented in my first video. And now let's change up some of the text. You know what, before I do that, let's just copy the CSS that we've written and save the file. So for our goals container, I just copied what I pasted in the browser here. And now let's copy what we have for the goals header. Let's save this and make sure it still looks okay. All right, now for the font. So this CSS is pretty straightforward, so I'll do it directly within the JSX file. Honestly, at this point, I don't want to bore you guys by writing CSS for half the video. So what I'm going to do is just copy some of the CSS that I have written for the demo project and just paste it in here. And if you guys are following along with this tutorial, then you guys can pause it here and write down some of the CSS. So for title section, I'm doing text transform uppercase to turn it all to uppercase. I'm adding letter spacing of 8 pixels and then font size 30 pixels. Okay, so let's save this and let's also add some styling for the add goal button. Again, I'm going to do the same thing for this. I just don't want to bore you guys just by writing styles for the whole video. So text transform uppercase for add goal button as well. We're going to make it display flex, and we want to align the items to the center. The last thing I'm going to do for this header is just add an image beside the add goal button. To do that, I'm going to make a new folder inside of public called images. And in here, I have some pre-downloaded images. If you guys want these exact same images, you can get them from the GitHub repository, which is in the link in the description. So I'm going to add these PNGs into the images folder. And then in the goals component, beside the add a goal button, I'm going to make an image tag. And the source is going to be equal to images/add.png. And I'm going to set the alt to add goal button. So let's see what this looks like. All right, the image is obviously way too huge, so let's restrict the width and height. So within the add a goal button, we'll target the image tag. We'll set the max width to 16 pixels, and we'll put some margin right of 8 pixels. So here's what it looks like now. That looks pretty good. So now let's move on to the list of goals section down here. So to do this, since we don't have an API that returns data for us right now, I'm just going to create an array that holds basically dummy data that we're going to be using. So we'll call it all goals, and it's going to be an array of objects. Okay, the first object is going to have an ID of 0. The name is going to be whatever goal you want. Lose weight. And then I'm just going to copy this object and repeat it a couple more times. So we'll have an ID of 1, 2, 3. So now that we have this array, the method that I'm going to use to display a list of all the goals is basically to map over this array. For every element of the all goals array that we're mapping over, we want to return some JSX element that displays that goal. So all goals.map, and then map takes a function and applies that function to every element of the array. We're going to specify that with the arrow function. For every object in the all goals array, we're going to return a goal row. And inside of the goal row, we'll have the name of the goal, and we'll create another style component for the action section, which is going to contain the edit and delete buttons. Okay, so let's specify some parameters here as well. So we're going to specify goal and index. So this function right here is going to be applied to every element of all goals. We're going to have the goal itself, and we're going to keep track of the index. So for name, inside of curly brackets, we're going to say goal.name, because this is, again, for individual goals. And then for now, we're just going to say edit and delete. We're going to add the image tags in just a sec. And now let's real quick create the styled components for these new ones over here. All right, so these are all just styled divs for now. Let's save this and take a look at what that looks like. Made a little mistake in the syntax. This curly bracket is actually supposed to be a circle bracket. So I'll just change that here. And clearly this is all being displayed within the header right now. So let's just move that down. So we don't want any of this stuff to be inside of the header. We want it to be outside of the header. And it's being listed like this. So let's format it in the way that we want. So for the goal row, to just save you guys some time with some of the basic styling, I'm just going to copy what I have and paste it in here. If you guys are following along, feel free to pause it here and add the styling. I'm going to explain these as I go as well. So we're setting it to display flex because we're using flexbox to style the goal row. We're setting the flex direction to row so that the elements go from left to right. We're justifying the content with space between, just like we did for the goal header. We're aligning the items to center so that they're vertically aligned, and then setting some padding and margin. And for the last child of the goal row, we don't want any margin. So let's see what this looks like so far. So we have the margin, we have the space between. Now let's style the actual name of the goal and the action section over here. So for name, all I'm going to do for now is add a text transform to uppercase. And then in the action section, let's actually add the images that we want. So here's what we have, but obviously we need to set the width and height of these as well. Again, this is just some basic styling, so I'm just going to paste it here. Display flex, align item center to make them vertically aligned. And then for the image itself, we're making the max width 20 pixels. I don't think we need width of 100%. We'll set the margin. And then for the second image inside of the action styled component, we don't need any margin. So I set last child to margin 0. All right, now let's just add some quick margin underneath the goal header as well. So we'll add a margin bottom of 45 pixels for the goal header. So I just realized we have some extra padding for the goal row over here. So inside of the goal row, I'm just going to get rid of the padding right, 45 pixels. All right, now you might see a warning inside of your console that says each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So let's just do exactly that. So each goal row that's being displayed here actually needs a unique key. So we're going to set key, and we're going to use some JavaScript in here. So we'll use curly brackets, and we'll say goal number, and then we can specify what goal number it is, which is going to be the index that we specified in the parameters up here. So let's save this and see if that warning is gone. All right, so it is gone. Okay, now we have some basic styling and view set up for our goals component. The only thing is we don't have any real data right now, and we can't add a goal with this add goal button. We can't edit or delete or anything yet. So the next thing that we logically want to do is start working on the backend API. So now we're going to start building an Express server whose only goal for now is to serve us some list of goals. Okay, that's all we're going to do for now. All right, so to start setting up the backend, I'm just going to minimize all the folders in here, and not inside the front end, but in the same directory as it. We're going to create a new folder, and we'll call it backend. All right, so in my terminal, I'm going to just go into that backend folder. The first thing that you want to do is npm init. Now, what this command does is it basically creates a package.json file for you. So we're going to set the package name to backend. That's fine. A lot of this stuff, we're going to just set the default for now. We'll set the entry point. I like to use server.js, so we'll do that. Test command, nothing for now. Blah, blah, blah. The default stuff is fine for now. We'll say yes. Now you can see that it created a package.json. If you don't know what a package.json file is, it's basically a file that can be described as a manifest for your project. And it includes the packages, includes the applications that you're dependent on, information about source control, and other metadata like project name and description and author and all that stuff. So that's how we're going to start off creating our backend. Now what we want to do is install some packages that's going to let us develop the backend in a much easier way. So first we're going to do npm install Express. Express is the framework for Node.js, and it simplifies development and it makes it easier to write secure, modular, fast applications. So we're going to install that, and let's get some other npm installations out of the way as well. So npm install. So some other packages that we're going to install are Babel. It basically transpiles ES6 syntax to vanilla JavaScript, so we can use more up-to-date and modern syntax for JavaScript within our Node.js server. So we're going to need the core library for Babel. We're also going to need the node library, preset, and we're also going to need nodemon. Nodemon is basically just a library that auto refreshes your server every time you make a change to a file. So that's going to be very useful as we start developing. And all of these libraries are specifically for development. So we're just going to say --save dev, because we don't want to have these stuff in production. So we're just going to say save dev. So let's install these libraries. All right, so now that we have our packages installed, let's just clear everything and close all these files just to start from scratch. Close all these. Okay, so first of all, inside of our package.json, when we were creating this package.json, we specified that the entry point is server.js. So let's go ahead and create a new file in this backend folder called server.js. And this is going to be the entry point for all of our code regarding the backend. Just some other stuff I wanted to show you in the package.json. All of those dependencies that we just installed, or at least the dev dependencies, are also listed in here. So the packages for Babel and nodemon are installed in here. And then the main dependency for Express is under this dependency object right here. Okay, so to start creating our server, we're going to be using Express. So let's import Express from Express. So as you can see, what we're actually importing here is this. The description says that the Express function is a top-level function exported by the Express module, and it's used to create an Express application. So to actually use that function, let's set a constant called app, and let's call that Express function that we just imported. Next, we're going to use the app.use function that comes with that, and we're going to use express.json. Now this does the same thing as body parser, basically, if you've used that library in previous Express servers. What this does is it parses incoming requests as JSON. If that doesn't quite make sense to you, then don't worry. Once we integrate the backend portion that we're building now with the front end, it'll be more clear. But basically, all you need to know is that it lets us send JSON objects from the front end. So to continue building our basic server, the next function that we want to use is app.listen. Now, listen allows us to listen for connections to a certain port. So we're going to listen to port 5000. And then the callback that we want to return once the server has been started is something like a console log that says app listening at http:/localhost, and then we'll say 5000. So let's save this. Now, this is the most basic setup that you need to start creating your server. So to actually run our server, we're going to need to specify a run command. Okay, so in the package.json, we'll go to the scripts object. We have one for test, but we're not really using this, so let's just get rid of this for now. Let's create a command for start. So once we run npm start, we need to specify what command we're going to be running. So what we want to do on start is use nodemon and run the server.js file. Okay, so let's save this. Let's go to our terminal and let's see what happens when we run npm start now. Okay, so it tries to run nodemon server.js, but then it says that we have an unexpected identifier from import express from express. So the reason why basically this is happening is because we're using ES6 syntax. Okay, we're not using vanilla JavaScript. With vanilla JavaScript, you would normally say const express equals require, and then you would specify the package. So we're not using this syntax. Okay, we're using more modern ES6 syntax. So in order for our server to be able to parse this syntax, like I said earlier, we're using babel. Okay, right here. So we need to specify that we're going to be executing babel once we run the start command. So within the start command, we're going to modify this a little bit. So we're going to say -- execute between nodemon and server, babel -node. So now let's see what happens. We'll run npm start again, and we're still getting this problem. That's because we actually didn't add a configuration file for babel yet. I know this is just a lot of boring setup stuff, but once we get past this boring stuff, we can get to developing the API. So it'll get more interesting in a bit. So we'll create a new file for our babel configuration, and we'll call it .babelrc. So within this file, it's going to be a very simple configuration. We're going to specify presets. So this specifies a list of presets to load and use. So what we're going to use, the package that we installed earlier called babel/preset-env. Now, this was a little bit hard for me to understand at first as well, but after doing some research, the reason we're using babel preset-env as the preset plugin is so that we can use upcoming JavaScript features in our server. So with that being said, let's start up the server one more time. And there we go. Now we got a console log saying that the app is listening at this URL. So our server has officially been started up, and we have just a very basic setup for it. Now, the last thing that I want to show you in this video is how to create our first endpoint. And an endpoint is basically a URL which allows you to access some sort of web service that's running on a server. So the endpoint that we're going to create is app.get. So this is going to listen to GET requests that are going to be sent to a certain URL. So we're going to listen to /goals. So if there's a request that is sent to the server at the /goals URL, then we can have some sort of callback function that does something. This function is going to take the request and it's going to have a response. So for any of our endpoints, we're going to be using the try-catch syntax so that we can return an error if there is one. And for now, for the error, we're just going to console log goals not found. Now, the goals that I want to return for now, since we don't have a database and we can't actually perform any database operations just yet, let's go into the goals.jsx file. And if you remember this array that we wrote over here for all of the goals, we're just going to copy this and we're going to make our server return just this array. So once we've pasted that here, we'll say res, which is the response, .send. And what do we want to send it? All goals. So all our server does right now is once there's a GET request sent to the /goals URL, we're going to try to do what's in here, which is to just have a list of all the goals and return that as the response. So to test out the API, I like to use Postman. Postman is basically just an application that allows you to send network requests to a server and see what the response is. So if you haven't installed Postman, I recommend doing that. It just really helps you test out your APIs and makes sure that endpoints are returning the data that you want. So this is just going to show us what's going to happen when we send a GET request to our specific URL. So we're going to specify http://localhost 5000/goals. And let's press send and see what this returns. So as you can see, the body of our response is a list of objects, which is exactly what we want, right? So for the scope of this video, that's all I wanted to show you regarding the backend. We're obviously going to be developing this further in the next coming videos, where we will create our Postgres database that's going to be storing all of our goals as well as our habits. And we're going to be able to send queries to that database and return the appropriate data. So just to give you a quick little summary of what we did, we created our goals component, which basically displays a list of goals in the left-hand column. Next, we set up the scaffolding for our Express server. We made sure our app is listening to a certain port, and we made one very simple endpoint for /goals. So make sure you stay tuned because there's a lot of really exciting development that's going to be happening in future videos. So I'll end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned anything new from watching this. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next part. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye.